Chris O'Connor here. Join our fabulous curmudgeonly community on Facebook at facebook.com/group/curmudgeonrock. Also look out for a Spotify playlist dedicated to this episode. Now, let's get started.
This is the Curmudgeon Rock Report, and this is your podcast made by rock geek iconoclastic outsiders for rock geek iconoclastic outsiders. For those of you who lament that rock music has gone the way of jazz and slipped into niche genre status, we are here to keep that flame alive by providing insight, analysis, recommendations, and honest takes, not hot takes. And hey, there's a good chance you'll learn some rock history you never knew before. Hip-hop started out as a party. As we covered on our earlier episode, Hip Hop Turns 50, a meditation on hip hop's birth, its Bronx-based forefathers were stewards of positivity and a vibe that lasted hours on end. There was no vocation per se, just crates of vinyl records, loads of stoned partygoers and artists, and the four elements of hip-hop: DJing, MCing, b-boying or breakdancing, and graffiti. And then there was a seismic event, the release and booming success of the Sugar Hill Gang's single Rapper's Delight, which broke out onto radios across the country in 1979. Suddenly, the most parochial of musical cultures was an export. Now came an opportunity to capitalize on that opportunity and present hip-hop as a product to the world. But how? And how much? And by whom? This is the time hip-hop started to come of age, and from 1980 to 1985, a monumental evolution and first foot forward occurred. That's what we're talking about and covering on this episode of the Curmudgeon Rock Report. We'll talk about the efforts to legitimize hip-hop within the worlds of commerce and art, and about the hustlers who were first to make moves. We'll tell you about guys like Russell Simmons and Kurits Blow, young dudes who got 2 hit songs on the radio and set recorded hip-hop in a clear direction. We'll then run through a staggeringly great run of singles that gave early hip-hop further shape, color, and meaning from artists including Afrika Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, and the dueling duo of UTFO and Roxanne Shante. We end by discussing the arrival of the album as a hip-hop art form. We weave together the stories of Profile Records, Run-D.M.C, Def Jam, and LL Cool J, from whom we got a signature hip-hop sound and 2 classic albums. Oh, and we make mention of a few silly movies you may have heard of, too. Before hip-hop became gripped by the dark violence of the Biggie and Tupac days, and then by the sing-songy insufferability of Kanye West and Drake, it was a bright-eyed and excitingly young genre that found its way as it went along. And its path as a recorded music and a bona fide product took place between 1980 and 1985. And that's where we will dial up the Wayback Machine on this episode. Welcome to the Curmudgeon Rock Report.
So, Arturo, you know that there's a place where hip-hop still flourishes. Real hip-hop, that is, still flourishes, right?
Gee, where is that?
That would be our parallel universe. Welcome, folks, again to the parallel universe. Over here, where blue is green and tall is short, and everything is a little bit different, especially people's musical tastes. That is, rock and roll and hip hop, and the really good stuff is still predominates. It still is on. There's still such a thing as rock radio. That's starting to dwindle, folks. They're still up on the billboards. They still sell Rolling Stone. You still sell out the arenas. It's not just Taylor Swift and Beyonce. It may not be as bad as Grand Funk Railroad, but it's rock and roll and hip hop and all that. It's still big. It's still the thing, and it's still major, man. And so that's just a long way of saying that Arturo and I cover new and newish records of recent vintage. here in the parallel universe. We want to turn you on to each one of us, turn you on to a specific album that we are into and we think that you ought to know more about. Arturo, in the parallel universe on this episode, what are you covering?
Yeah, in the parallel universe, this band would be huge. I
Hmm.
love them. The name of the band is Otoboke Beaver, and it's their album from 2 years ago called Super Champion. Now, coming from Japan, this all-female quartet released a trio of albums in the early teens before going on hiatus, then reforming in 2019 to release a fourth album. A few years later, in 2022, they released Super Champion, and it seems like the fifth time is the charm, as this record has generated a word of mouth, underground, cultish fan base for the band in North America and Europe, as evidenced by the substantial touring they've done lately, in addition to the various international music festivals they've been a part of. Now, what do they actually sound like? Absolute fucking chaos.
Hmm.
Progressive punk is what I would call them. The stylistic mishmashing of genres within one song that Beck used to do back in the day with sampling is what these ladies do with their instruments. Within the course of one song, Otoboke Beaver can go from hardcore punk to free jazz to experimental noise rock to industrial to even super melodic girly girl J-pop. Most importantly, though, they manage the remarkable feat of not alienating the listener with needlessly complex, impenetrable, overly cerebral bullshit. It
Hmm.
isn't contrived. It isn't contrived at all.
Nope.
Otoboke Beaver's brand of anarchic punk feels instinctual and natural, like a new portal to originality in rock music has been opened from a place of pure joy and wonder, not pretentious indie hipster douchebag posturing, i.e., most rock bands today. And yes, it's fucking catchy as hell. In a way, or in many ways, the arrival of Otoboke Beaver is the most punk rock thing to happen this decade, aside from Australia's The Chats. You just cannot go wrong with amazing song titles like I Am Not Maternal, You're No Hero, Shut Up, Fuck You, Man Whore, and Dirty Old Fart is Waiting for My Reaction. Oh, yeah. And also check out the totally anarchic bonkers video for their equally anarchic bonkers song, Don't Light My Fire. Somewhere Jim Morrison is smiling at that one. Otoboke Beaver are enough to restore at least this curmudgeon's faith in the healing power of rock and roll. Chris?
Yeah, my favorite thing about this band and this album especially, 18 songs coming in at a robust 21 minutes and 26
Yeah.
seconds.
Yeah.
So that's less than a minute and a half a song.
Yeah.
That I love that. The longest song on the record is the first song, "I Am Not Maternal," which is 2 minutes and 4 seconds. So gotta love it. Basically, to me, this band is kind of like what if the Go-Go's tried to do the Boredoms. That's
Yeah.
essentially what it is. It's just as chaotic as the Boredoms, but it has that kind of almost like that girly energy, that kind of like fun power pop energy. So
Yeah.
it's got that Go-Go's early 80s Los Angeles energy to it.
Mm.
But again, that they definitely are engineers of chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like them. They're neat. There's definitely no one else like them in rock.
Yeah.
It's hard these days to come up with a completely original shtick.
Yeah.
And what is it? Otoboke Beaver,
Otoboke.
Otoboke
Yes.
Beavers. You really got the pronunciation down cold, man.
I wonder if they know the double meaning of the word beaver.
They probably do. Uh, they're uh, they're pretty sharp. They seem pretty sharp. I mean, they got to be sharp to come up with something like this. This is
Yeah.
just sort of this weird off kilter concoction of all those styles. And I was listening to it today for the first time. I was on the treadmill. Boy,
Yeah.
what a interesting treadmill song or treadmill album. It goes all
Yeah.
over the place. Let's just put it this way: you're not going to be doing any sort of rhythmic type of shuffle
Yeah.
when you do this. It's just otherwise you might fall off the damn treadmill. You'll take a header. Uh, so that was quite the experience. But yeah, I definitely recommend this album too. It's originality. There's not enough of it in this world. There's plenty of it in the parallel universe, and yeah, this band is definitely. They may actually be the house band for the parallel universe now. I'm telling you, that's how it's going. So
Yeah.
so now we've talked about this 18 song, 22-minute record. Arturo, on the heels of that, how does 79 minutes of space cowboy noodling and yelling sound to you?
Yeah, by comparison, not so good.
Eh, it's actually not quite as bad as it sounds. I mean, I know that description sounds insufferable. I mean, I tend to be a fan of big, dumb, loud, goofy, hard rock, and this album that I'll be talking about certainly fits that description to a T. We're talking about the French trio Slift and their new album Ilion, which just
Mhm.
came out in January. I tend to be more in this band's wheelhouse as far as intended listenership.
Mhm.
But objectively speaking, I will say this: yes, it's 10 songs and 79 minutes long, and yes, it has a lot of fat and a lot of trim, and it's just this big bombastic prog album. But they could have toned it down just a tad. Really, how you feel about this outfit, this French prog outfit, Slift, it really depends on how you feel about 1970s space rock. It's one of these things where there's not going to be too much middle ground. Like if you're a big fan of Pink Floyd, Rush, King Crimson, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Black Sabbath, and other groups
And
of that ilk,
Hawkwind.
and Hawkwind and artists of that ilk, then you can probably say that you can enjoy that you're capable of enjoying this band. And really they get it down to a T to the point where their guitarist pretty much owes David Gilmour a tip. He should get like 5% of all the money he makes just
Yeah.
because he basically is a wonderfully talented ripoff of David Gilmour, for sure. And so uh, I'm a huge fan of the space rock, and so I can definitely appreciate this album, and I can definitely listen to it in spurts. It's one. I think it's mood music. It's like you really have to be in a mood to go down that. We were talking before we recorded down that sort of that prog rock rabbit hole, and
Yeah.
it's a very loud, screechy, uh, drony, reverby rabbit hole,
Mhm.
but you really got to be in that mood to do it. And so I see myself listening to this album in pieces, maybe not the whole thing, but there's a couple of great actual individual tracks. There's the 11-minute opener Ilion, the title track, which it features a pulsating bass and a bell and really some bell crisp guitar wankery that
Mhm.
ought to again just get on its knees and bow down to David Gilmour.
Mhm.
And it really, these guys, they're kind of hard to understand in the sense that because of all the reverb and it's yelly. This dude doesn't sing, he yells.
Yeah.
And so once but sit down and go find lyrics and enjoy it because this one's got a particularly enjoyably goofy one. Quote, "We've seen the monuments of gods rising from the dust to the sky. We've heard the thunder and seen the lightning heralding a storm from the depths of time. We felt the wind and the rain on our skin. Our faces lifted to the clouds. We were thousands. We were one. Now the human age is gone. The engine's fire burning like million suns. Fury as a flame in the eyes of daughters and sons. And from the torn sky are falling angels. Hellfire engines. And from the torn sky are falling angels." End quote. Whoa, whoa,
LSD.
whoa, dude. Yeah, yeah. Like I said, for people that appreciate the goofiness of stuff like this will work. There's
Yeah.
also a song called Uruk, spelled Uruk, which I suppose is supposed to be a name of an alien or a planet or something. And this is a slow burning romp with a catchy little riff, and it's got reverb on loan from the heavens and barely decipherable harmony vocals. How indecipherable? I've never seen this before. Even the popular lyric sites like Genius can't help us out here. You go there and it says unavailable. But hey, The song pounds and it grinds in an engaging fashion anyway. As I said before, one thing about doing a 10 song, 79-minute album is that you end up risking self-indulgence. And that's kind of what happens here. It's a little self-indulgent. It's purely ridiculous. They know it's ridiculous. This band, by the way, they have great album covers.
Yeah.
You remember when they did the 2020's which was kind of an album, and a lot better than this one, by the way.
Yes.
It's tighter and more song focused, and has even like sharper David Gilmour ripoffs than that one. But that album cover, it had like a demon on a planet with stars and planets and shit in the background. And on this album, it's skeletal looking aliens puking intestines, or it looks like they're puking intestines. And so,
It sounds like
yeah,
you guys are kind of ripping off a page from the King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard book.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, they're doing lots of yeah, space cadet rock, for sure.
Right.
So ultimately, the album really didn't need to be this bloated or bombastic, and they could have dialed it down a little bit. But at the same time, with a band like Slift, what would be the point of that?
Yeah. Well, yeah,
So
the point comes in their first album, Uman, from 2020, which was in both of our top 10 lists
yeah,
of that year. I
yeah.
generally like Slift. But that's why it saddens me to say that this album kind of sucks for a lot of the reasons that you gave.
Hmm.
It's a double album. Disc one tends to like merge the heavy sheet guitar sludge metal of Neurosis with like the heavily complex multi polyrhythms of post metal bands like Death Heaven. But it merges it in a really unappealing way because, like you said, there are no fucking songs. There's just
Yeah,
sound and sound and sound.
yeah, and it's just ba
And
bang, ba bang, ba bang, ba bang,
yeah.
ba bang, ba
And
bang.
disc, right. And disc two, what they're doing is a little different. What they're doing is just heavy, ponderous, ominous prog rock with a lot of like a choral, hymnal, choir vocals,
Yeah,
not unlike Amon Duel, but
yep,
again, in the worst way imaginable. It's kind of yeah, Neurosis, Death Heaven, Amon Duel. Those bands are all great together, done by Slift. They just don't inject them with songs. You need songs. At
yeah.
least Amon Duel knew how to write songs
Yes, they did, and
to
that's
put this
that's a
to
fair
put this
complaint.
sound through. You know?
Now, like I said in the beginning, I'm one of those people in their kind of their core listenership that will give them a free pass on not having enough songs, just
Yeah,
because I like this kind of cosmic slop.
yeah.
I'm a fan of it, and so I'll generally speaking, at least once a week, I'm in the mood for something like this Swift record.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so this will scratch that itch. But yeah, if you're looking for formalism,
Right.
this is not your record. They've shown that they're capable of it on Uman.
Yeah.
But ain't no such thing as formalism here. Like you said, it's the dark side of Amon Duel, which is to
Right.
say that yeah,
Yeah.
don't expect anything too tuneful.
The ass side of Amon Duel.
Chris here again. Arturo and I have differing feelings about the subscription streaming service Spotify. While he likes to rail against the algorithmic component, I like the ability to find and then manage a personal catalog of music. The program is especially great for assembling playlists. Well, guess what? We've assembled a playlist to accompany this episode. The playlist features a healthy mix of all the music we describe and analyze during the episode. Think of it as a soundtrack to your curmudgeonly life. Find the link in this episode's description. And also become a member of our curmudgeonly community on Facebook if you haven't done so already. Let's now return to our regularly scheduled programming.
All right. So we named this episode Hip Hop Comes of Age, and in parentheses, 1980 to 1985. Because, as I alluded to earlier in the parameter setter, this is the period where hip hop starts to be commercialized and it starts to become a commercial force. And we'll talk about the many ways in which it did become that during this period. But before that happened, a little group with a song called Rapper's Delight kickstarted the whole thing. Right,
Yeah,
Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the great flukes in the history of popular music, and this is where it starts. Now, as we said in our first, we did an episode last year where we talked about, and it coincided with the 50th anniversary of hip hop, about the birth of hip hop, and we talked a lot about how it really started off as a cultural phenomenon, and it was as
Mm,
much about culture and about partying as it was about music. And it was a bunch of severely impoverished kids just looking for a little bit of positivity and self-esteem by building this culture around the parties.
yeah,
They had no idea, or they weren't even thinking that this could ever be anything that was a musical product. I mean,
yeah,
because a lot of the emceeing and a lot of the shows, these guys would be out there, doing the equivalent of a mix of call and response and dance hall toasting, and then
yeah,
some, actual lyrical forays, but they'd be going for like 3 or 4 hours at a time.
yeah.
And so it was kind of inconceivable that this could ever be reduced to tape. Well, lo and behold, it took
Mm,
three guys from Edgewater, New Jersey, and an upstart label called Sugar Hill Records to really get this thing going. So what happens is you've got a woman named Sylvia Robinson, who her and her husband are running a small label called Sugar Hill Records, but they're not really getting it off the ground and they're struggling. Well, Sylvia Robinson is introduced to hip hop, and so now
mm,
she's thinking, well, this is something that I have to try to get on tape. Well, she's at a pizza parlor. This is how the story goes. A pizza parlor one day in Edgewater, New Jersey, and there's a guy there who was managing the rapper Grandmaster Caz actually at the time, but he's working at this pizza joint to help pay for his managerial forays. A guy named Big Bank Hank, and he's sitting there rapping to himself while he's working some Grandmaster Caz lyrics. Well, Sylvia Robinson overhears this and says, "Oh, oh, oh, that's what I'm looking for. That's the sound I'm looking for."
yeah,
And so Hank, he gathers up a couple of other guys that he knew, one guy named Wonder Mike and another guy, Master G. They
yeah.
audition for Sylvia Robinson, and pretty quickly they're in a studio jamming out with a house band, with an interpolation of Good Times by Chic,
Yeah.
and they were able to distill the hip hop thing down into 15 minutes, which again was remarkably short considering where things started. And from there is born a phenomenon. I'm quoting Jeff Chang. Uh, I'll be drawing from two books a lot in our discussion on this episode. One, Jeff Chang is the author of a 2005 book, a biography of the hip hop generation called "Can't Stop, Won't Stop,"
Yeah.
which I definitely recommend. And the other book I'll be quoting from is a book that was just released last fall, actually, called "The Come Up" by
Mm,
an author named Jonathan Abrams. It's an oral history of the rise of hip hop. And so I'm going to start by quoting Jeff Chang from "Can't Stop, Won't Stop," where he says this about Rapper's Delight and the Sugar Hill Gang. Quote, when three anonymous rappers stepped into black indie label owner Sylvia Robinson's studios to cut Rapper's Delight, they had no local expectations to fulfill. They had no street reputations to keep, no regular audience to please, and absolutely no consequences if they failed, which was true. These guys had no association whatsoever with the scene in the Bronx. They were just three random dudes. And then Chang writes a
right.
little bit later, quote, in 15 minutes, clearly the whole world had changed. And
Mm,
so, uh, and so it has lots of reverberations in a couple of ways. One, it kind of is an oh shit moment for the guys from the Bronx, and obviously they're all annoyed, and they're
yeah.
not exactly sure how to react.
Yeah.
This coming from the come up. We're quoting DJ Charlie Chase of the Cold Crush Brothers. He says, quote, when Rapper's Delight came out, it set hip hop back 5 years. Hip hop started in 73. In 77, that shit was preschool for us at that point. We were already rhyming. And then
Yeah.
Easy AD, one of his bandmates in the Cold Crush Brothers, says, we heard the song. We just thought it was whack. We looked at it like, what? They not even MCs. And so what ended up happening is now these guys who are pretty advanced, they have to take a step back when they get themselves signed, and they have to start sounding like the Sugar Hill Gang.
Mm.
and do this more disco kind of disco and funk oriented thing, and it's not as minimal or anything like that. So that now they have to do it as this pop music.
Mm.
But alas, the Sugar Hill Gang did have the first mover advantage, and they set the precedent. They're the alpha from which the rest was born and formed. Now, just how big did Rapper's Delight get? Well, it actually, and this is pretty amazing. In January 1980, Rapper's Delight peaked at number 36 on the
Mm.
Billboard Hot 100, and
Wow.
it also was number 4 on the Hot Soul Singles chart in December of '79. And
Wow.
it had a lot of international success. It reached number 1 in Canada. It reached number 1 in the Netherlands. It reached number 3 in the UK. And
Jeez.
it also is the most successful 12-inch single of all time. This is back in the early days. This is how urban labels would release their music with these 12-inch singles. And this kind of became the early on vinyl. This became kind of the early hip hop main format before
Yeah.
albums. Albums become a thing, and we'll talk about that in 1984.
Right.
Before that, you're really talking about these 12-inch singles. Well, this is the number one selling 12-inch single of all time. At one
Jesus.
point, Sugar Hill Records, they were printing and shipping 75,000 copies a week.
Jeez.
And so they were dominating radio in New York. They were dominating the record stores in New York. Like the trucks. According to these couple books, the trucks would roll it up to the record store, drop off the crates, and the copies would be gone by the end of the day.
Wow.
So it was really selling like hotcakes, and it was just this absolute phenomenon. Going back to the come up, Bill Stepney, who was a famous A&R guy and publicist at Def Jam, and also a member of the Bomb Squad, which was the production crew that helped birth Public Enemy. Bill Stepney says, quote, "There's no way to convey how popular Rapper's Delight was as a song. It was like it was everywhere, to the point where you just had to say to yourself, wow, this is revolutionary. This is not just a new art. This is not funk. This is not even just James Brown. This is larger than that." So
Mm.
even at the time, nobody had ever heard anything like this. Basically just these three dudes just kind of rhythmic talking over the same motif for
Yeah.
15 minutes. And so this is like an alien life form that comes down that, people aren't really sure what hit them. And
Yeah.
so that leads to the inevitable question. Well, okay, what next? Now what? We
Yeah.
what do we
I
do?
feel, yeah, I
Go
feel
ahead.
bad for guys like Cool Herc, all these pioneers,
Yeah.
and like all of a sudden this, basically this a pre-manufactured, prefabricated group just step in front of them
Yeah,
and
well,
take all the accolades and all the record sales.
yeah, but to be fair, I mean, you got to remember that the pioneers weren't in it they had no notion that there was an industry or that there was a commodity to be
Yeah.
had. And
Right.
the really telling quote, and we're going to use this to kind of a couple of quotes to segue into this next section of okay, well, Sugar Hill Gang hits now what happens? But Kool Moe Dee,
Mm.
who was a member of the Treacherous Three and actually had a pretty strong solo career starting in the late '80s. A
Yeah.
lot of people will probably remember the Wild Wild West, that
Right.
song and video from 1988. But anyway, Kool Moe Dee says, quote, "I personally thought it was a one-off. I didn't think that they were ever going to turn hip hop into an industry because, quite frankly, it was just African American teenagers. We were the
Yeah.
last generation that was consciously bred not to believe in ourselves.
Mm.
Putting a rhyme together and then going out and saying the rhyme and seeing if people respond was a huge boost to self-esteem. But we had an older generation telling us that this isn't real music. It's not going to last. Who's going to pay to hear people talk over records that already came out that you don't play any instrument? Who's going to sit there and watch a DJ scratch records?" And then another telling quote from Grandmaster Caz, who's part that, Big Bang Hank was his manager, and Hank famously stole lyrics to
Mm.
use on Rapper's Delight. So Grandmaster Caz says this. He says, "We hadn't accepted the fact that hip hop had started to spread to other places. We were still under this veil of, yeah, we're from the Bronx."
Mm.
And so what does happen then? So clearly, hip hop had, extended a little bit of a reach, at least into the tri-state area and at least out to Edgewater, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And so now you have this race that the Sugar Hill Gang is out there. So now, how do you follow that and what do you do with it? And how exactly do you make it into an industry? Well, things kind of proceed on three fronts that really the Sugar Hill Gang and Rappers Delight opened the doors for, and I'll cover all three. So, what one, there became a rush to sign artists and generate singles, and it became this sort of entrepreneurs rush and a
Yeah,
race.
hip hop was very much a singles driven market for a long time.
Yes, for a long time. And so now it's this idea of now you have all these labels, the Sugar Hill Records, for instance, they signed Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, which is funny because Grandmaster Flash was on record, according to Can't Stop, Won't Stop, as being one of those guys that never thought that in a million years that hip hop could ever be a recording
Yeah.
thing. And so you have, these artists, the Cold Crush Brothers and the Treacherous Three and the Fantastic Five Freaks, they're
Hmm.
all, they're all
Yeah.
signing to labels at this point. But then you also have some folks that are trying to extend and find new contours and follow up on the heels of the Sugar Hill Gang's Rappers Delight by coming up with their own pop music.
Right.
The most, I think, concrete example of this is an interesting partnership that emerged. There's a journalist and a promoter, a guy named Rocky Ford, who, yeah, Robert,
Rocky Ford. Before Rocky Ford, there was Rocky Ford.
yeah, Robert Rocky Ford. I must break you. But anyway, so he connects with Russell Simmons. Russell Simmons, obviously everybody knows who Russell is, the founder of Def Jam, and one of the forefathers of the hip hop industry. He's starting out as a young promoter, and he had hooked up with Rocky Ford, and Ford came up with an idea to, let's say, wouldn't it be cute if we had a Christmas rap? And so Simmons at that point was connected with Kurits Blow, and Kurits
Mm.
Blow was from Harlem. Simmons was from Hollis, Queens, and so that these three guys, Ford, Simmons, and Kurits Blow, they get together and
Before I have a question, Chris. Curtis Blow, that was his stage name. Was that like a nod to cocaine use? His name? Curtis
I don't know that for sure, but I would be shocked if it wasn't. Yeah,
Blow.
I have a feeling that was probably the hood wink wink. But you got to remember, like one of the original MCs was Coke La Rock.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the thing. So these guys get together and together with a few other musicians, they come up with the song Christmas Rappin',
Mm.
and which is a really ridiculous kind of almost disco-ish song. It's only like 4 minutes long or something like that. It's well 7.5 minutes long, but it's basically about them holding a party on Christmas and then Santa showing up and getting down as well. And so it was cute, but it became a big hit. It became a big radio hit as well. And then they followed that up with another song we'll talk about a little bit later called "The Breaks," and which is
Them's are the breaks.
yeah, just a marvelous, marvelous little hip hop song. And so again, so you're getting some folks that are figuring out how to extend this. They're kind of doing it in the same vein as Rappers Delight. I mean, even Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, they had an early song from 1980 called Super Rappin', which goes on for 12 minutes and is the same kind of disco interpolated, just kind of get down, boogie woogie
Mm.
kind of track. And so yeah, so you get a lot of that going on during this period. And then through this, you also get some of the artists that were big in the Bronx that were, some of the kings of the party. Bambaataa, for example,
Mm.
are
Right.
figuring out ways to put their vision and their idea of hip hop culture on record. Bambaataa eventually hooks up with Tommy Boy Records in its infancy, and they've
Mm.
released a series of amazing singles. They never got an album out of Bambaataa, but they got like 6 or 7 amazing singles, and we'll
Right.
talk about one of those a little bit later. And so that's what's happening during this period. Initially, in just uh, right after the breakout of Rapper's Delight, is you get this rush to figure out how else we can put it on tape, and if we can figure this out and distill it down into a more of a pop music. And so you're getting
Yeah.
that. And then you've got two interrelated movements as well. So you at the same time that you have this rush to see if you can sign artists and make singles and get more hip hop on the radio. You also get this effort to legitimize hip hop in the swankier clubs and in the downtown art scene in New York.
Hmm.
And this is a big thing. And this is
In
really
other words, middle class white people in this
yeah,
case.
no, upper class white people.
Oh yeah,
We're not talking middle class. We're talking the artsy fartsies.
yeah, yeah.
And this is really a story about Fab Five Freddy,
Mhm.
Fred Braithwaite. He really ends up being the bridge between worlds. He's like an academic class kid from Queens, and like he had like Thelonious Monk as a house guest when he was growing up, and
Wow.
he's kind of happening scene. But Fab Five Freddy became a really well-renowned graffiti artist,
Mhm.
along with his partner Lester Quinones in the late 70s and early 80s. And
Right.
Freddy just had this gift for going in between worlds, and so he's the one that he's going down to the Bronx and forming the relationships with the Bambatas and
Mhm.
the Grand Wizard Theodores and sort of the uh, the pioneers of that scene.
Right.
But he's
Right.
also because he's chosen graffiti as his main art and he's trying to legitimize that. He's making contacts down in the downtown art scene
Right.
and the galleries and coming up with this exhibitions. And so he ends up being this really important middleman for everything that's going on. And here's a quote from Grandmaster Flash, and this comes from Can't Stop, Won't Stop. Grandmaster Flash talking about Fab Five Freddy, again, Fred Braithwaite. Fab was like one of the town criers. He would come into the hood where whites wouldn't come and then go downtown where the whites would and say, listen, there's some music these cats is playing, man. It's hot shit. You got to book these guys. So I got my first taste of playing for an audience that wasn't typically black, end quote.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so, I mean, a couple of famous examples that Freddie was able to invite Bambaataa to play at a Keith Haring exhibition opening on St. Mark's Place
Mhm.
in 1980. And in April of 1981, he had an exhibition opening for his own. It was a series of graffiti artists, and it was an exhibition that was happening down there. But he was able to get the Cold Crush Brothers, the Jazzy Five MCs, which were a Bambaataa related or group, and the Fantastic Freaks. He got them to play the exhibition opening party. So uh, he got them eyeballs and he got them an audience with a white artsy artiste crowd.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, Freddie also was friends with Chris Stein and Debbie Harry
Right.
from
I was going to
Blondie.
talk about that. Yeah, because
Yeah,
1980, actually, this is probably the epitome of that bridge between,
yeah.
the hip hop scene in the Bronx and the
Hmm.
lower Manhattan art world,
Hmm.
art scene that was going on. Blondie were an art pop band, really, basically from New
Hmm.
York and the CBGB scene. And they put out the single Rapture in 1980, which had kind of a disco. It's kind of a disco-y song,
Yeah.
following in the vein of a Heart of Glass, but it features Debbie Harry actually rapping.
Yep.
So it's actually so people talk about the Sugar Hill Gang as the first rap song to be big. Well, the second big rap song, or the second big song to feature rapping that was a number one hit was Blondie with
Yep.
Rapture, where she actually name checks Fab Five Freddy in her rapping.
Yeah, and Freddie, Fat Five Freddy is in the video for Rapture, and I,
Yes.
I also want to say Basquiat's in that video too in the background.
I'll just see, but I'm Fab Five Freddy's definitely in it because he gets a lot of he's practically dancing with Deborah Harry as they're
Oh
walking down.
yeah, 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 absolutely, So he's definitely in the video, but Basquiat might be in it too because Basquiat's background was as a graffiti artist as well.
Yeah.
But I may be wrong about that, but I think he might be in the video too. So yeah, so Freddy's kind of the networker and kind of bridging the worlds. And so by doing that, it gets hip hop into Central Park, it gets it into Greenwich Village, it gets it exposure to white artists and white tourists. And so it starts to slowly gain an appeal through the early 80s that way. And then there was another landmark moment through this, and it's related because it involves Fred Braithwaite again. There's
Hmm.
the movie Wild Style from
Hmm.
1982, which basically is a very vivid depiction of the early hip hop scene.
Hmm.
And well, frankly, it's not much of a movie, and even the director kind of admits that. The director is an artist who was from upstate, I believe he's from upstate New York, a guy named Charlie Ahern, who had befriended folks in the Bronx and had befriended Freddy and was intimately familiar with that scene and wanted to make a movie centered around hip hop culture.
I've never
And
seen this.
so
Is this a narrative film or a documentary?
it's very thinly a narrative film, but it might as well be a documentary
Uh-huh.
because I
Okay.
mean it's basically the story revolves around Lee Quinones being a graffiti artist and not wanting his new girlfriend to find out that
Hmm.
he's a graffiti artist,
Yeah.
and so it's kind of ridiculous. But what it does is it has all these scenes in it of rap battles, of graffiti being made in action, of b-boying, of just a really famous sequence in it is when the Cold Crush Brothers and the Fantastic Five Freaks get involved and they do an MC battle, but they do it on a basketball court. And so there's interconnecting of them being on either side of the court, having an MC, like a rap battle, but also playing ball. And so it kind of equates MCing and the battle rapping with sports. And so it kind of, lends to that. It plays up that competitive nature of hip hop. And we've talked about hip hop culture comes straight from competition. It's, who's the best, who's the prettiest, who's,
Yeah.
who's the most awesome. And it comes from that. So there's that. And the show also culminates in a show at an amphitheater in Brooklyn that the producers
Hmm.
didn't even get a permit for. So yeah, there's
Huh.
pure rebel shit right there.
Yeah.
And so Freddie was intimately involved in the networking and the making of that film as well. Lee Quinones obviously being his partner, another brilliant artist there. And so Ahern, it's kind of a ridiculous movie, but as a testament to hip hop and showing what hip hop was all about, is probably the most vivid. It's probably the most important depiction of hip hop from the early '80s. And what it
Yeah.
did is it gave them a product to sell hip hop to the world.
Yeah.
They took it on an international press tour. They ended up in Japan,
Right.
doing b-boying and graffiti and rapping there. And so they kind of were able to tour an international and give them an international exposure. So really, there it is. There's the rush to create singles and sign artists. There's the bridging of the worlds, where the black movement from the Bronx comes in contact with the white art scene of downtown Manhattan,
Hmm.
and then Wild Style that comes out there and really kind of shows off hip hop in its true element, and makes gives it another product and another
Right.
product avenue to show itself off to. So this period we're talking about, this is really the period from 1980 to about 1982.
Hmm.
And from there, the momentum just kind of grew as hip hop became this kind of revolutionary thing. It had a music, it had dancing, and it had art, and so it was a legitimate scene. And now it's further getting legitimized
Hmm.
by these entrepreneurs, by these artists, by these visionaries
Right.
there in the scene.
On this episode, we analyzed the period when hip hop came of age. For the next episode, we're going back to our second Golden Age of Rock series as we analyze the critical year of 1968. It was a fascinating year in regard to rock music being tugged by two extremes: go bigger, more progressive, more psychedelic, heavier, or go smaller, more minimalist, back to the roots of rock and roll. We'll look at seminal albums by the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Van Morrison, the Byrds, the Band, the Kinks, the Grateful Dead, and others. Join us next time as the Curmudgeon Rock Report brings you the second golden age of rock, 1968. Right, so these singles that defined hip hop in the early to mid 1980s, there are several of them. The first two we kind of already spoke at length about, but we'll say a little more. Christmas Rappin' and The Breaks by Kurits Blow, both 1980. Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. And so Kurits Blow was 19 years old at the time that these songs break. And he's basically, he was a hustler. He was a marketing student in college, and he was just refining his chops out there on the club scene, and selling himself really, really hard. Christmas Rappin', from what I understand, he didn't write most of the lyrics, but essentially, again, it's a 7.5 minute disco song. The most notable thing about it is that song that bass line from the Queen song "Another One Bites the Dust."
Yeah, yeah.
They stole it from Christmas Rappin'. And so that bass line is featured prominently on that dung 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 dung. That absolutely is the defining thing, and sped up on Christmas Rappin', and goes on for 7.5 minutes. It's got lyrics about Santa Claus. It's corny as hell, but it's funny as hell, and it just Christmas was ready made for early hip hop. It's done in the vein of disco. Like most of the stuff, like the first 3 or 4 years, most of it is offshoots of disco. Yeah. And that was definitely the case with Christmas Rappin'. The Breaks is a little bit different. And The Breaks is pretty tremendous. It's still 7 minute long, but there's a lot of artists, including Kool Moe Dee, who really give this credit as being like the first real hip hop song, because it's the first one that had a hook. Like I said, these are the breaks. Yeah. And it's just this got not just that as far as a hook and the kind of the motif, but also Kurits Blow going through this really clever series of lyrics over the stretch of it, and basically any meaning and any way that you can use break that's humanly possible. Kurits Blow does so in this song. It's still it's catchy as hell. It's fun as hell. And it's still to this day one of the most engaging hip hop singles of all time. I think that without the breaks, you don't get a whole lot of other songs. I mean, it's like Kurits Blow is basically teaching people how to do hip hop well on record, and really making, remember, the DJ had always been the star of the hip hop parties in the Bronx and elsewhere there, and not really the MCs. Well, that started to change, obviously, with Rapper's Delight, and it really becomes the case that the MC is predominant when Kurits Blow hits with these songs. Arturo, what do you say about these songs?
Well, it's a great song. It's an important hip hop single, but by current standards of rapping artistry and the art of the flow, Kurits Blow, his delivery and his style of rapping is kind of ancient. It doesn't really age well, does it?
No, it is ancient, but again, it's clever, it works, but it's not exactly poetry. It's not Gil Scott-Heron.
Yeah, he's not even Tupac.
No, he's not even Tupac. And so there is a little bit of an ancientness to it, but it works. And as a pop song, again, I think that because it's got hooks and it works as a pop song, and I think that was a revelation at the time that it came out, that it wasn't just this 15-minute distillation of a hip hop concert, which essentially is what Rapper's Delight is, and that's what Super Rappin' is too. It's like this, double-digit minute distillation of one of the concerts. This was an actual single, and this was an actual song, and this was an actual pop hook fest.
Yeah.
So I think that's what makes it important, but not quite as important as the next song.
Yeah, the next song, the song that made the German electronic group Kraftwerk more popular in America than ever before.
Yeah, absolutely. Planet Rock by Africa Bambaataa and the Soul Sonic Force. Now here is kind of a turn in hip hop where this is, I think, the first time where the producer starts to become a star as well.
Right.
For these songs, Bambaataa was looking to kind of, he had decided to like one love, one unity.
Yeah.
He wanted that, peace, love, unity, and having fun. With that was the motto of the Zulu Nation. He was trying to capture that in music. And he
Mm.
was able to do that by hooking up with originally from Boston, but then relocated to New York, a producer named Arthur Baker, who
Mm.
later became more famous for working with New Order. That
Right.
became his more famous hook. But together, Baker and Bambaataa, they have a shared love for craft work,
Mm.
and they want to sort of memorialize this. And so here's a true fact. There is not actually a sample of Kraftwerk in that song.
Oh.
It's more of an interpolation of the drum part from Numbers
Mm.
by Kraftwerk. Really kind of that, that kind of that clap trap drum
Mm.
that's in that, and that kind of
Yeah.
thing that kind of drives it. They interpolated that in the drum machine work. They interpolated that song Numbers by Kraftwerk. Didn't sample it, but the
Hmm.
the rest of it, the keyboards, the vocoder, the vibes in it, it's all, there was a musician named John Roby who was
Hmm.
responsible for most of that, and
Right.
they came up with it, and it's 6.5 minutes of just this funky as hell, Germanic disco song that really kind of captures Bambaata's philosophy, one planet under rock, so to speak, and just really encapsulates it bridges the gap between it shows that hip hop could be a dance music, but also shares a lot in common with that sort of European that motorique. So motorique and hip hop beats now shared something in common, and it was because Bambaataa and Baker had that vision to put it together. So tremendous, tremendous song. The John Roby uh, keyboard work in it is especially fantastic. What say you,
Right.
Art?
Yeah, no, I mean this is came out in 1982.
Hmm.
This is a seminal track. Africa Bambaataa should be remembered. Unfortunately, his personal life is taking a little more
Yeah.
precedence in recent years with the
Yep.
accusations of pedophilia, basically.
Yep. Hmm. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. That's kind of gotten in the way.
Yeah, but he should be remembered as a pioneer. Again, another one, another early hip hop great who no, they were not they were not albums artists, they were singles artists,
Yeah.
and
And then
this may be his most defining single.
yeah, absolutely his most defining single. And for what it's worth, I encourage people to check out some of his other singles, Renegades of Funk,
Mhm.
Looking for the Perfect Beat, which is my personal favorite one. There's Jazzy
Right.
Sensation, which is
Mhm.
another one of those Arthur Baker songs, originally from 1982. So
Right.
just really, really visionary stuff.
Mhm.
As is our next song and songs on this list, right, Art?
Yes, the next one. This one comes, I think, oh, yes, it is also from 1982. It is Grandmaster Flash, DJ, and the Furious Five, who are the rapping group. And they had two tracks this year, The Message and White Lines.
And actually, I got to correct you on here. White Lines is actually turns out is from '84. Uh,
84. Okay, my
yeah,
mistake.
but no, my mistake actually, because I told you about that first.
Oh,
But anyway, so the message, yeah, is on an album. It's of the same name called The Message from 1982, and it's actually here. It's got kind of a weird history, and here it is. There's a guy that they were signed to Sugar Hill Records, and Sugar Hill
right.
Records basically had a house band, and there was
Yeah.
a guy in the house band. I believe he was their
Mhm.
percussionist, a guy named Duke Booty. Who, yeah,
Duke Booty.
yeah, and that was his performance name, and he was a lyricist and he was a producer, and he actually, along with the other guys in Sugar Hill Records, that they came up with that beat, with the that
Yeah.
that famous synth loop. That I think
Right.
everybody knows that dun 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 dun
Yeah.
dun 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 dun. and he came up with that. And he wrote most of the lyrics, and they they wrote it not originally. They had the song, and then Sylvia Robinson was like, "Well, I think that would be perfect for Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five." Well, it
Right.
turns out Grandmaster Flash wanted nothing to do with it because he
Mhm.
was uncomfortable with the whole social conscience message of it, and
Wow.
sort of
Okay.
the imagery of the streets and of the sort of the
Right.
bleakness of that life. And it's it's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
Right.
And
Right.
he didn't want anything to do with that. Well, Melly
Right.
Mel, turns out, who was the main rapper in the Furious Five,
I think he's
was
also
kind
the main lyricist too, wasn't he?
and he was the main lyricist. And
Yeah.
so he turns out he was cool with it. And he lent some lyrics and some rapping that he had from previous. It was a unreleased verse from Super Rapping. Well, he took some of that and performed, and he agreed to perform on the song. And actually, it was a dispute between Melly Mel and Grandmaster Flash because of this that actually broke up the Furious Five.
Yeah.
And so
That's
Melly
that's
Mel,
why that's why technically the credit for White Lines don't do it is Grandmaster Flash and Melly Mel,
yeah, or
not Grandmaster Flash and the
and
Furious
yeah,
Five.
the original record said Grandmaster and Melly Mel, and
Yeah. And by
yeah,
the way,
they're
Chris, it came out in 1983, actually. White
what's
Lines.
that? White Lines?
Yeah, 83.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we eventually get it right here at the Curmudgeon Rock Report.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Duke Booty and Melly Mel, they co-write the lyrics and they co-rap it, and yeah, it becomes one of the great still to this day, one of the great hip hop songs of all time. And again, the rhyming is a little bit primitive there as well, but the
But the
hook,
lyrics are not. The
the
lyrics aren't. The
lyrics,
lyrics are
the
really
lyrics
good.
are universal. The lyrics, they maintain, and that hook,
Yeah.
will live on in perpetuity. It's one
Yeah.
of the best hooks in the history of hip hop.
Yeah.
And so not only do they have one of the great musical hooks with that synthesizer line, but they have one of the great lyrical hooks with that
Hmm.
it makes me wonder how you keep from going under.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just marvelous, marvelous stuff. White Lines is a song, as the name suggests, is a song about the dangers of cocaine.
Right.
And that's another song that was kind of produced by the house band at Sugar Hill Records. But Melly Mel just sort of that's more of a star vehicle for him. And
Hmm.
originally it was going to be an ironic, like Sylvia Robinson co-wrote it as well, that it was going to be kind of an ironic tribute to cocaine. And so like they're going to make it sound like the most wonderful thing.
Yeah. But
But
no, it's
they,
it's it's actually the opposite.
yeah, but they decided to kind of play it more straight than that,
Right.
because obviously I think that the full name of the song is White Lines parentheses don't do it.
Right.
And so it becomes more of a cautionary song
Hmm.
in the end. But there again, it has a fabulous bass line to it, and it's just a really rocking song and really great hook to it, something like a phenomenon, and
Yeah.
just really just kind of there. And so again, it's glorified disco, but it works,
Right.
and it's probably Melly Mel's finest moment as a rapper is on that
Right.
song.
However, now we got the social commentary. The next key single is by arguably hip hop's first real rock stars,
Yep.
and one of their first singles is also to this day still one of their best tracks ever.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about "It's Like That" by Run-D.M.C. And so story there is that uh, Russell Simmons' little brother Joey Simmons
Right.
is Run,
Right.
and they're looking to get into the rap game, and or he's looking to become a rapper. And at some point, he hooks up with a high school friend of his named Daryl McDaniels, otherwise known as DMC.
Yeah.
And the two of them come together and they start working with a producer named Larry Smith, who was
Mhm.
part of an outfit called Orange Crush. And they come
Right.
together and they start making these songs. The first two songs they did, they wanted to come up with a single that they come up with. It's
Right.
like that. And on the B side, Sucker
Mhm.
MCs, which is,
Mm.
almost as famous. But it's like that. It's just got this really great little minimal beat where it's just really spare and menacing. And it's got Run and DMC trading lyrics back and forth about crime and poverty
Yeah.
and about just sort of dealing with life in the ghetto. It's basically ghetto
Yeah.
philosophizing,
Right.
with that hook, it's like that, and that's the way it is. And so all the song is literally it's just a bass drum, a snare, and a keyboard note on the one.
Mm.
And you keep getting that keyboard note on the one, and it goes through that the entire song that way. And again, the B-side was Sucker MCs, which was another minimalist classic that actually hits harder
Mm.
because it's got myriad disses and boasts, and that song is all drums and claps. And
Right.
so what they're doing is they're starting to, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. What they're doing is they're distilling hip hop back to its elements
Yeah.
and to its essence. And so instead of sort of the disco filler that a lot of what the early songs were, they're getting it back. It's minimal, it's spare, it's sparse, it's bare bones, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's just it gives them like ample space for their voices and for their lyrics to shine. And
Yeah.
so it's almost revolutionary in a sense
Yeah.
what they're doing, and
Yeah.
it's like that. To me, it's still my favorite Run-D.M.C single because it is so simple
Mm.
and really really good stuff. Any thoughts about this Run-D.M.C song specifically?
Also, exactly. It's minimalism. It's minimalism at its best, and it's the space. This track has a lot of space in it, and
Yep.
sometimes it's a testament to the fact that in music, in any kind of music, sometimes the best notes you can play are the ones you don't play.
Yeah.
And leaving the space out there. And the space
Yeah.
itself is an ambiance for the track. And a lot of musicians today, especially today, who are obsessed with complexity and having,
Yep.
as many chord progressions as possible, playing as many notes in 1 minute as possible. And that's why their music is forgotten and nobody remembers it because they don't utilize space. They don't utilize air, giving
Yep.
giving giving the music air to breathe. And a lot of
Uh,
contemporary and modern, not just hip hop, but just in other genres of music, don't understand that. And that's why their music sucks and won't be remembered. Sorry.
right. Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, it's minimal, but the beats that are there hit hard.
Yes. And that's
And
why they hit hard because the space is there. It augments with when it does hit, it
yeah.
hits harder than if you have a lot of notes and beats going on at the same time.
Right. And in that sense, it gets pretty hypnotic
Yeah.
actually, because it's like a lot of the Run DMC songs, and we'll get into this later, they early ones, they ran like 4 to 6 minutes.
Yeah.
They were not short songs and they were not short exercises, and they were minimal. And so they went on like that. And so they kind of get this hypnotic effect going, and it's like hypnosis in action. It's
Right.
pretty tremendous. Okay, so the next couple of singles we're going to talk about, and so this is like one of, battle rap became a thing, and you would get like you would get these battles, or you would
And,
get
and, well,
these
and it's not just battle rap. In the history of hip hop,
beefs. Yep,
female rappers tend to be overlooked.
yep,
And here are female hip hop artists. I mean, breaking ground not just for being women in a mostly male field, but doing the battle rapping as well.
yeah, absolutely. And so what we're talking about here is this is one of the great like first musical beefs that you had. That you have the song "Roxanne Roxanne" by three guys from Brooklyn named UTFO.
Yeah,
That was their thing, and it's basically a song about them trying to get in with a girl named Roxanne. Roxanne,
yeah,
Roxanne, I want to be your man.
yeah.
A lot of folks our age will remember that one from elementary school. That became a huge hit. But what happened was, so you get this song Roxanne, Roxanne, and it's not exactly the most forward thinking song. It's not that in of itself, it's not feminist. But what it did
Yeah.
is it spurred a whole bunch of response songs from women
Yes.
ostensibly known as calling themselves Roxanne.
Yeah.
And the most famous and easily the best of these is Roxanne's Revenge by
Yes.
Roxanne Shante.
Yeah.
Now, Roxanne Shante, when she did this, was only 16 years old, but she was from Queens,
Hmm.
and she had the good fortune of being friends with a very young producer named Marley Marl, who
Hmm.
went on to become one of the best hip hop producers of all time. Worked with Big Daddy Kane, Biz Markie,
Yeah.
and a number of others. And so what you have here is you have UTFO doing this song about courting not so successfully a young lady named Roxanne, and then Roxanne's Revenge is a response song meant to be the other side of the courtship, and it comes complete with disses, big time disses of the UTFO rappers.
Hmm.
And she's bragging about her skills as a rapper and putting down theirs. And the beat mimics the original. It's not quite like the original, but it mimics the original. And so you had this great and more stuff came from this and went back and forth between UTFO and Roxanne Shante, and it just
Right.
started this kind of back and forth. And it wasn't like Tupac and Biggie where people ended up getting murdered.
Yeah.
It was more in good fun, but it was
Yeah.
kind of, it was a little bit sophomoric, but it was cool. And when I was 9 years old, it was big in my schools.
Yeah.
It was big in my school, and just a lot of fun, and just a lot of good stuff. And especially Roxanne's Revenge. That is some clever shit.
Yeah. To pile on top of the Roxanne Shante thing, the following year in 1985, she got involved in another rap battle. Roxanne Shante did with another female rapper named Sparky D. In 1985, Roxanne Shante put out "Bite This,"
Hmm.
and then she name checked Sparky D. Sparky D came back at her with a single called "Sparky's Turn." In parentheses, Roxanne, you're through. Both those tracks are awesome, and I think they're both better than Roxanne, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And the second thing here, not too long ago, Netflix put out a biopic, a dramatic film about the life of Roxanne Shante called Roxanne. If you're interested in watching a biopic about Roxanne Shante's life, go check that out.
Yeah, I'll definitely will. So the next song, and this is another song that harkens back to my elementary school days as a 9-year-old in Syracuse, New York, that not only was Roxanne and Roxanne's Revenge the big thing with the kids back then, but there was also the Fat Boys. When the song
They
the
love
Fat
they love their beatboxing.
Yes, they do. And the song Fat Boys Are Back. And true story, and shows how much of a dumb kid I was. For years, I thought that was Fat Boys Are Black. And I'm like, why, yes, the Fat Boys are black. Uh, but anyway, so the Fat Boys were basically like hip hop comedians. They were three, yes, fat guys from New York that
Yeah,
rapped about food and about, sort of comical romantic stuff, but mostly about food. And so, so this song, it's got this, really kind of corny, like 5 note keyboard note beat
yeah.
with women in the, chanting in the back, the Fat Boys are back. And then with Prince Marky D, Cool Rock Ski, and Buff Love, each taking turns rapping, especially Prince Marky D, where he has like this one weird ass rhyme about eating beans and bananas. And then Buff Love was the human beatbox. And
Yes.
so but his beatbox was like the corniest, most amateurish version possible. It was the
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
basically what most white people think of as beatbox. They think of Buff Love, that's who they would think of. And so you were talking. It was definitely a lowest common denominator phenomenon,
Yeah.
which is probably why it was such a big hit among the kids in my school. Uh, Not necessarily with me, but with the kids in my school, they loved themselves some Fat Boys. I'm telling you, it was something to behold.
They were popular in Miami too when I was living in Miami at that time. Fat
Well,
boys were big, man.
yeah, I could see it. They kind of like would be a precursor to booty music. They're certainly just as juvenile.
They were cheesy. They were really cheesy, dude.
Yeah, I know. And then of course they took advantage of their sort of their comic shtick. And a couple years later, they got a big hit with the song "Wipeout." They did a song called "Wipeout" that had
Yeah.
featuring the Beach Boys, and then they did a rap version of the Twist with
Yeah.
Chubby Checker on the hook in like 1988. So yeah, and then of course they did one of the funniest movies of all time, Disorderlies. If you've ever seen Disorderlies,
No.
but that is like one of the dumbest, funniest ass movies of all time. I definitely recommend it. Anybody that loves dumbass movies and hip hop and the Fat
Yes.
Boys,
Mhm.
that movie is for you, boy. That movie is for you. I'm telling you. And then we end this roll call of hip hop singles by actually, this is one of the best, and this is kind of a bridge song, and it's kind of an early preview of hip hop's golden age. And this predates Rakim and a few other and Chuck D by a couple of years. We're talking Dougie Fresh and Slick Rick doing Lottie Dottie,
Mm,
and All Hail the Beatbox. And this is
yeah.
the real beatbox.
Right.
Dougie Fresh is the greatest beatboxer in the history of mankind. He could do some stuff with his mouth that you wouldn't you wouldn't think. Like Rozelle is about the only one that competes, but
Right.
Dougie Fresh could really do some great, some really original stuff with his mouth that really kind of mirrored percussion of all kinds of all styles. So you
Mm-hmm.
get him and you combine him with Slick Rick, who was originally from Britain and is one of the great storyteller rappers of all time,
Yes.
and really really funny. Has this kind of laconic, kind of
Yeah.
performing voice,
Yeah. Yeah.
when just really really fun. Well, this song, Lottie Dottie, people remember it. Snoop Dogg made it popular in 1993. He covered it, Lottie Dottie, we likes to party, we just some
Yeah.
we just some man up on the mic, and when we rock the
Yeah.
mic, we rock the mic hype.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just a really silly song, but it's basically Rick recalling a day where first he's like, primping and preening in front of his mirror,
Yeah.
where he's getting ready for the day in his bathroom. But then he runs into an old girlfriend, and
Right.
then all of a sudden the old girlfriend's mom comes out, starts beating up the old girlfriend because she wants to be with Rick, and then Rick fighting off the mom because
Hmm.
the mom really wants to be with Rick. So it's kind of, and it gets a little blue. He makes a reference to her wrinkly pussy. Uh,
Good
so it does get a little blue. But
Yeah.
it's a fun song, and it's got a lyrical sophistication to it that was really really rare at this
Yeah.
point. When we're talking, this song was from 1985. You really didn't, like Rick became more famous about 1988, but
Yeah.
this predates Rakim and Chuck D and KRS-One by a couple of years. So really,
Right.
really seminal single. And it kind of shows where the bridge was going to. And this is sort of the end of the bridge, and that's where it was going to. Art, any thoughts about Lottie Dottie?
Yeah, well, this song is great. I think Slick Rick would do better tracks later on, though.
Oh, he did.
Uh, he would do a children's story back in
Oh, yeah.
1989. He also did a Treat Her Like a Prostitute,
Hmm.
a classic case of hip hop misogyny, if there ever was one.
Yeah. Yes.
You know,
Yeah, indeed.
yeah, but
Yeah.
he was yes, Slick Rick was one of the pioneers of storytelling hip hop or storytelling rap, but he wasn't really the first one there. There were people doing it before him.
Yeah.
For example, back in 1983, there's a really dark song by a guy called The Rake
Oh,
called
yeah.
Street Justice. And basically, it is a harrowing story about like a thug gang that break into his home, rape his wife, and kill his daughter. They get arrested, get put in front of a judge. They get off. They don't get committed. So he decides to take a vigilante justice on his own. Stays in his house. The guys who were charged with the crime but were not convicted threatened to kill that guy. We're gonna kill you because you told on us. And at the end of the story, he's at his home with his guns, waiting for the thugs to come at him. He kills them all, and he basically acknowledges and he accepts that yes, I'm going to prison for what I did, but I'm glad I did it, and I don't care if I die in prison for it. That's
Yeah.
pretty dark.
Yeah. Yikes. That
Yeah,
that
you
that
should
is some
check it
dark
out.
shit.
It's called Street Justice by The Rake from 1983.
Yeah,
It's a
definitely.
story rap like Slick Rick, but oh boy, it is nothing funny about it.
No, no, nothing funny at all. Nothing funny at all. So, their ends so you can tell a lot of this story by those singles, and about, there's an increasing sophistication as it goes along. You're
Right.
starting to get away from the disco and getting into something that's a little bit
Mhm.
more true to the streets and true to the Bronx. Well, at some point, you figure, it kind of like the evolution of rock and roll, where it starts off as singles, and then in comes the album as a form of
Mhm.
expression. Well, you knew
Yeah.
that eventually that would happen to hip hop, and it did. Starting in early 1984 is when this starts to
Right.
happen.
Right.
And it starts with our friends Run-D.M.C.
Yes.
And their debut record, Run-D.M.C. And so this kind of tells the story of, that there's sort of some overlapping stories
Hmm.
to tell here. There's the story of Run-D.M.C. and their association with Profile Records, and there's the overlapping story of the birth of Def Jam, which,
Hmm.
Russell Simmons was, Joey Simmons' brother Russell. We've talked
Hmm.
about him. He was an entrepreneur. He was a promoter. He was a businessman and a visionary who eventually hooks up with Rick Rubin, who was a
Hmm.
student at NYU living in a dorm when they first
Right.
got together, and they formed Def Jam in early '84. Well, at the same time, Russell's working to break his brother's band, Run DMC, on Profile, and so in a lot of ways this sort of overlaps. And so uh, the combination of them, Run DMC, Profile, Russell Simmons, Rick Rubin, and then we'll talk about LL Cool J. Eventually, they turn
Yeah.
it. They really revolutionize hip hop by really just sort of distilling it down to its main elements, to the beat, to the rhyme, and to the
Right.
energy. Like you already talked about that space,
Yes.
in between everything else, and how minimalism is beneficial, and that especially happens in with these albums and during this streak. So anyway, to organize this a little bit better, let's talk about Run DMC's self-titled debut album. Now,
Hmm.
again, they had they had made a name for themselves in late '83 with the single "It's Like That" on the A side and "Sucker MCs" on the B side. Well, the heads of Profile Records, they get them to do a couple more singles. They have Jam Master Jay and then Hard Times, which may actually be the best song on the record. Besides, it's like that. It's the first track on it, and it's another sort of crime, poverty, and sort of bad days ahead type of song.
Are you sure that wasn't inspired by the famous Dusty Rhodes promo?
No,
Hard
it was not hard times for Dusty Rhodes and his fan base. It was hard. It was hard times for Run DMC. So
time.
let's just clarify that. No, 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 baby. Come on, baby. It was not hard times. But anyway, that was good. So they had like four singles in the can by the end of '83. Well, the heads of Profile Records are like, well, what if this is so revolutionary what these guys are doing, distilling it down to their element and, really, going minimal, really featuring the rapping. They have the tag team rapping, they have the energy, they have that freshness to them, all that. Well, what if we could get a whole album out of this? I want to
Yeah.
release an album, so let's get them, try to convince them to record five or six more songs, and let's get a whole like 40-minute album out of this. Well, out of that comes Rockbox, which
Hmm.
is probably the most important hip hop single of all time, only in the sense of a couple of things. One, it grafts rock and roll with hip hop explicitly. A guy named Eddie Martinez plays guitar and shreds like a mother on that song,
Yeah. Right.
and really, and so not only so it's in the same sort of minimal stripped down spirit, but with guitars running
Mhm.
through the drums as well.
Right.
And so you get that, and it was also the first hip hop song to get airplay on MTV.
Right.
So the video for that, so that's why it's hugely important, because it kind of splices the idea of rap and rock together, and it
Yeah.
gets on and it gets on MTV. And so they eventually get nine songs out of it, and they put this out, and it becomes a huge hit. It's still considered one of the best hip hop albums ever made. It's actually number 378 on Rolling Stone's 500 greatest albums list of all time, that they came out with in 2020. As far as the album's performance itself, it peaked at number 53 on the Billboard 200. It also reached number 14 on the top R&B hip hop albums chart. And it
Hmm.
was also the first hip hop album to ever be certified gold by the
Hmm.
RIAA. That
Wow.
happened by the end of 1984. And
Right.
so, again, the thing that's striking about this record is it's so unlike the stuff that came before it. It's nothing like Planet Rock. It's nothing like the Sugar Hill Gang. It's nothing like even The Message. It's nothing like any of these things. It's spare. It's in your face. It's all drums and rapping. And
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Well, you know who also liked this album, Chris?
who was that?
Well,
No idea.
our resident music critic that we adore so much, Robert Christgau.
Robert Christgau. What
This
did
is what he
Christgau
said.
have to say?
Okay, he said, quote, though a bit upwardly mobile for the highbrow lowbrows who regard money lust and the death throes of capitalism as two sides of rap's only fit subject, DJ Run boasted about attending St. John's, of all things. The competitive fatalism of the spare, brutal, it's like that sucker MCs was unforced and dead on, and Eddie Martinez's Hendrix Funkadelic metal on the expansive rock box proves that even street minimalists can love guitars. But this does more than fill in around two of the finest singles of the past couple of years. It's easily the canniest and most formally sustained rap album ever. He wrote this in 1984. A tour de force I trust will be studied by all manner of creative downtowners and racially enlightened Englishmen.
And he was right.
While their heavy staccato and proud disdain for melody may prove too avant garde for some, the style has been in the New York air long enough that you may understand it better than you think. Do you have zero tolerance for namby-pamby bullshit? Do you believe in yourself above all? Then chances are you share Run-D.M.C's values. A minus.
There you go. And in case everybody was wondering, it definitely proved not to be too avant-garde.
He wrote it. He wrote a review for the follow-ups album King of Rock from 1985.
Yep.
Not as long. He's a little down. He's a little more down on it, but it's much funnier.
Okay. And do share that.
All right, King of Rock from 1985, the follow-up to this classic self-titled debut by Run DMC. Whoa. You can tell these guys are real rock and rollers because they sounded so much fresher before they got what they wanted. And you can tell they didn't get it all because their rhymes still make a lot of sense sometimes. Especially You're Blind, a protest for and at the ghetto rather than about it. But their well-timed You Talk Too Much, one of my favorite songs,
Yeah.
routine runs aground on stupid insults. Nagging wife? Gosh. And old jokes. Why don't you find a short pier and take a long walk? Groan. It's not funny is either a perverse, albeit well-named joke or a complete washout. Even the boasts run thin. Take airplane flights at huge heights. I mean, what do sucker MCs do? Just taxi around the runway? B plus.
Okay, yeah, that is pretty good, but it's pretty much indicative of Run DMC. And I will say this, and so here's another legacy of this album and of Run DMC, and this is from Raheem of the Furious Five, the Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, and talking about Run DMC and their success. And this is from the Come Up. Quote, to us, Run DMC helped white people figure out how to rap. And that was a good thing and a bad thing to us at the same time. It was necessary in order to push the culture forward and develop its growth. But when you have something organic, as soon as the corporate world puts $2 into it, it changes the nature of what that thing was forever, which in a way is a good point, but not immediately, because what happens is Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons. So you get so Russell kind of co-produced the first Run DMC record with Larry Smith, and they came up with that sort of that template for the big drums and the kind of the guitars, or the sort of the little touches. Well, Rick Rubin takes that and he finds, Def Jam finds this young kid, this 16-year-old kid from Long Island named James Todd Smith, who was a little bit of a prodigy in terms of his charisma, in terms of his rhyming skill and his lyrics. And they're like, okay, this guy's a star, so let's put it together. And then Rubin comes up with his own minimal guitar and drum-driven style, and mixes it with the stylings of one James Todd Smith, who you otherwise known as Ladies Love Cool James or LL Cool J.
Right.
And so with Rubin and LL Cool J, they worked together and they released the album Radio, which was the first full-length album released by Def Jam
Hmm.
in 1985. And so this is kind of where it all starts to make sense that there's a phenomenon happening with Run-D.M.C. When they're on profile along with Russell, while Russell's working with Rick Rubin to get Def Jam off the ground. They further that minimalism, and then they find one of the great stars in the history of hip hop, and it culminates in this great album, Radio. And LL
Yeah.
Cool J he pretty much is like the James Dean of rap, you know. He's just like, he's just one of those dudes that like dudes look at and say, "Yeah, you got it going on, man." You know, yeah, you can't help it. The guy is just pure charisma, but he also was incredibly, incredibly talented as a rapper. I think people forget that. And it's amazing to me that this is a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old kid that is rhyming with sophistication and, has that edge to him, throughout. He's got that braggadocio, he's got the battle rap, but he also can balance that out with stuff that's more tender and sometimes that are more clever. And sometimes he has rap songs that approach a ballad feel in the
Yeah.
lyrics. He doesn't get there. He actually says before the album closer is a song called "I Want You," but he even says at the beginning of it, "Look, girl, I'm not going to sing because I just don't do that." And
Mm.
so, but he's macking hard for this girl's affection anyway, and he's doing it in the rhyme.
Right.
Like one of his lines is, "Without you, my life is bitter like a lemon." And so, so all throughout, I mean, you've got, some seminal stuff comes on this. There's the song Rock the Bells, which
Yeah.
probably has one of the three or four most quintessential Rubin beats, where it has
Mm.
like this scratched out guitar lick that's introduced and reinforced throughout the song. And it's got this otherwise sort of spare kind of skittering beat. And it starts off with the famous lyric, "LL Cool J is hard as hell," at the beginning of it. And it's just, I mean, it's one of the best singles in the history of hip hop, and it holds up because LL had a flow that is one of the more emulated flows in the history of hip hop. I mean, he's right there with Slick Rick. He's right there with KRS-One. He's right there with Chuck D. He's the most underrated of those guys by a
Yeah.
lot. But he was incredible, and
Yeah.
he's go ahead.
Yeah. I'm chalk me up for one of those guys who was never that impressed with LL Cool J. I'm not gonna say he was a shitty rapper. He wasn't, but his stuff got a little too soft. I mean, this first album that he put out, Radio, was probably his best one because by
Yeah,
the end of the 1980s, he was kind of made fun of by a lot of people in the hip hop community. He was becoming kind of a joke for all his ballads and his boasting about how good he is, and how fine he is with the ladies, and how good looking
yeah,
he is. And he kind of became a target for a lot of criticism by other rappers, you
yeah.
know.
Well,
So
well, 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 well he was the most subtle misogynist in the history of hip hop. That
yeah.
he played the ladies' man, but he kind of did it in a way that was like, you women can't resist me because I'm that type of guy. you know, and some of that other stuff where I need love and all this other stuff. So he made you think that he was being all smooth when he was being just, he was being the kind of like the shameless Ken, from
Yeah.
like the Barbie movie. He's
Yeah.
kind of like that. He's really a shameless Ken, where people
Yeah.
think where he's trying to play a lover man. But
Yeah.
which is kind of funny because like the most misogynistic song he ever did is probably on Radio, "Dear Yvette," which is just hilarious. He says, like Santa Claus said, "You're a ho ho ho," and so they said there's no real swearing in it. It's just clean brutality, and
Yeah.
he's really carving Yvette up in
Mm.
this song. And so you have those, and then you have the title track, really, "I Can't Live Without My Radio," which is
Mm.
it's all drum blasts and claps. It's got scratches on the chorus, and it's just nasty rapping from
Yeah.
LL. And like I said, LL at his best, he was as good as those other guys I've mentioned. And again, like you said, he became kind of a joke because he had that kind of lover boy persona that he
Yeah.
built up for himself over the last,
Right.
like from 87 to 90.
Right.
But man, that dude could rap. That dude could write and that dude could rap. and he really shows that on radio. And so like I said, so these two albums that I've talked about, the Run-D.M.C record, the self-titled one, and Radio, really establish hip hop as an album
Mm,
oriented
right.
genre as well as a singles oriented genre, and that proves that a hip hop album could be a thing that could be successful, and that really, as much as anything, sets up hip hop, what I call hip hop's golden age from
Mm,
1986 through 1991, and it
right.
just sets up, where you get like one great album after another.
Mm.
And really, it was, and even Chuck D, Chuck
Mm.
DMC, even Chuck D from Public Enemy has even said it, that like Run DMC taught everybody how to do, and LL, they taught everybody how to do a rap album,
Yeah.
and even as an homage, I mean, Rock the Bells is prominently in a spot sampled in Night of the Living Bassheads by PE on "It Takes a
Mm.
Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back."
Yeah.
So these two albums taught everybody how to do it, and then it sets up the golden age. So, any other thoughts about these two albums, Arturo?
Yeah, no, I mean, personally, I'm from when it comes to Run DMC, I'm more partial to Raising Hell than I
Yeah.
am the
I am too.
self-titled debut. But the
Yeah.
self-titled debut is important. It has one of the most fascinating ambient soundscapes of any hip hop album. And like I said, I'm not a huge LL Cool J fan as much as you are, but I do give props to Radio, especially the single. That is a
Yeah.
titanic early hip hop single, and
Yeah.
it is one of the best singles of all time. So
Yeah.
yeah, I do agree with those albums being having their and ending this era of hip hop with those two albums as like the foremost in the forefront, I should say.
Yeah, and I should mention, by the way, that Radio peaked at number six on the top R&B hip hop albums chart, and at number
Mm,
46 on the Billboard 200 albums
okay.
chart. It also went platinum
Wow. Okay.
by 86.
Okay.
So it was a big success, and just the fact that it reached that it was still a top 50 album on the Billboard 200 albums chart is really something at that point. And then finally, we just have to end it. That by the end of this period where hip hop comes of age, it's always a thing when white people in Hollywood discover your product,
Yeah.
and so not only are you getting sort of the artsy fartsies getting fascinated with hip hop, you're also getting Hollywood fascinated with
Right.
it, and so you end up with like three of the worst movies of all time in a lot of ways, especially Beat Street. You got three movies: Breakin', Beat Street, and Crush Groove. And Crush Groove really is that's more 1985, but the other two are 84. And Beat Street kind of takes the wild style story of the graffiti artist getting discovered, and does it in the corniest way possible. Like their idea of graffiti is really just kind of amusing. It's just sort of like some prop master's idea of what graffiti should be, and so it's really just a joke. And then Breaking, obviously, you get Boogaloo Shrimp and Ozone Chambers and the girl, basically them auditioning for a fancy college by trying to get into like a real like art school by doing
Mm,
breakdancing,
yep.
and it just really really corny stuff. And notice, by the way, how both of those movies are essentially about white acceptance of the black art,
Right. Yeah.
and so.
And there's Beats, what was it, Breaking Two, Electric Boogaloo?
Yeah, and that came out in 1985, and that is even cornier. That it's got that hospital dance sequence.
Oh yeah, the surgeons are doing the worm as they're operating.
Yeah, and then you got the Chinese girl like doing the bit with like the walker, and just like doing like b-boy dancing with the walker. So there's that, and then Crush Groove is basically it mirrors the origin story of Def Jam, and it features a whole bunch of rappers, and it's kind of more or less a concert film, but it's still
Yeah.
corny. It's still corny as hell. So yep, it did make the movies, and so ultimately, I think what you could say about this coming of age period for hip hop, it's kind of fascinating because it really we've said before, and we said it on the last of these hip hop episodes that there was no precedent for it. It was this
Yeah.
completely organic thing that it is more culture than anything else. And so now you're figuring out, okay, so you've got this culture and now you've got this happy accident with the Sugar Hill Gang. Well, what do you turn it into? How do you turn it into a commodity? How do you turn it into an industry? What
Right.
shape does it take? Can you do something that gets to the radio, that can make it onto the big screens? How do you do that? And I think
Mm.
that this period is instructive because it's this unmatched creativity. It's all these creative people. And it was really an entrepreneurial culture because what you had a chance to do was define something that had never been defined before.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what all these people did. And that's what they did through all these singles. And so even like the UTFO Roxanne Shante
Yeah.
battle
Right.
you're inventing beefing.
Yeah.
You're inventing battle rapping back and forth. And so the idea of having singles as competition, you know,
Mm. Right.
is just so that's just so everything during this period is seminal and untapped, and it's what really makes it incredible to cover because it was boundless. You
Mm.
know, when you say that, would you
Well,
agree?
yeah. I mean, yeah, because it's a genre that's just starting. It's kind of in its well,
Yeah, it is in
in a
its infancy.
in a
Yeah,
commercial respect, it's in its infancy,
yeah,
not as
absolutely.
artistic, right?
Right.
Artistically, it's kind of in its adolescence,
Yeah.
but as a commercial force, it's in its infancy, and yeah, there are no limits at this point to what hip hop can be and what it will be. It's the wild, wild west still.
Yeah, and you make a good
As
point,
far
by the way. You make a good point that hip hop was in its adolescence because, that LL and even DMC have said that they kind of quote unquote grew up on hip hop,
right.
that they were familiar with it and were vibing on it from even like the stuff in the 70s,
Yeah, yeah,
LL had discovered rapping by the time he was 9,
yeah,
according to these books that I'm reading, or that
yeah.
these books that I have. And same thing with DMC. They're all about hip hop at this point. And so, yeah, they are second generation. So they're taking that spirit and they're taking that stuff and they're figuring out and they're kind of carving their own niche by going
Mhm.
into the recording
Right.
aspect of it. So
Yeah,
so yeah, so in a way, hip hop's in its second generation.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that it's coming of age, but it's in its second generation, and this is
Mhm.
kind of the byproduct. All of this is the byproduct of the energy of that second generation.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
with that, folks, as we are wont to do at the end of these episodes, we encourage you to join our curmudgeonly community on Facebook. Which is a really great thing that we have going up there. What are you on now? 2005, or you're coming up
Well,
with
that's
your
that's coming up soon.
Yep.
That's coming up soon.
Yep.
2005.
And you just did 2004, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, definitely folks, go check that out. I'll be contributing more as we go along, and you can find us at facebook.com/groups/curmudgeonrock. Join us there, please. It is an open invitation community. Unless you are not welcome within 500 feet of a school, we'll probably let you in. If you have any other thoughts or any things to share, or if you disagree with anything we've said in this episode, or if you have any other suggestions for like hip hop singles that you loved back in the day, you can hit us up at curmudgeonrock at gmail.com. And also, which is our new tradition, we are dropping a Spotify playlist link in the show notes to this
Yes.
episode. So look out for that when wherever you're accessing our podcast from, whether it's Apple or Google or Stitcher or wherever. Look for the link to the playlist. It'll be there, and mirth and merriment shall take place.